my dad was a native of Jett, Oklahoma. And after World War II, he came to Kansas and worked for my uncle as a hired hand on a farm. And then he and my uncle went into business together and were farmers and dairymen. So I grew up at Furley, Kansas, proud member of the Furley 4-H Club. My dad moved to town. We moved to Newton, Kansas in 1959. At that point, then I started going to junior high, middle school, which was completely different for a kid who'd been in a school that had 53 kids. There were 7 in my class. And so I spent my youth as a kid out on the farm helping Mom with the bucket calves and doing the hay and all that kind of stuff. And then we moved to town, and I became a town kid that longed to live back in the country. That was that, and graduated from Newton High School in 1965. I was working at the Boeing Military Airplane Company in Wichita, Kansas. And I was just shy of my 19th birthday when the Selective Service people decided I was breathing and it was Vietnam time. So I got called up for my physical, and I joined the Navy. And I went in the Navy at age 19 in 1967 because I wasn't going to go to Vietnam. So I was going to join the Navy to see the world, and I saw San Diego and Guam and San Diego and Vietnam. I was in supply. I was a storekeeper, second class. I was an E5. I made E5 after 2 years, and I was a supervisor of, in Vietnam, I had about 70 or 80 Vietnamese nationals who worked for us. We supplied for the 2, 3, and 4 Corps of South Vietnam. We supplied everything for the Navy and Marine bases, and we had a lot of those river boats, patrol boats, and all the Marines. We supplied anything from, unfortunately, body bags to ammunition to small transistors. The whole schmear. It was called Naval Support Activity, Saigon. And our boss was Admiral Zumwalt, who eventually became Chief of Naval Operations. Finished up my tour, I came home, and I'd gone back to school. I had a few hours, didn't ever get very many hours in college. And I started working as a person who ran the warehouse for my friends, supply again, for my neighbors who had a building supply store. And I worked for them for several years, and I'd gotten married, and first wife was going to school, and I was working, and she signed me up under the VA, GI Bill, for a radio broadcasting school. And you know how my humor is, it's kind of off the wall, and I went to broadcasting school, and while I was in broadcasting school, I was hired as an all-night disc jockey at a radio station in Wichita. So I was doing the stuff in the daytime for the building materials and going to school and disc jockeying, and didn't need much sleep apparently in that age in my life. I was an all-night disc jockey at the radio station KICT in Wichita, Kansas. And there was a man there whose name was Larry Steckline, and he was the general manager and part owner of that and the KFRM radio stations. And I started doing ag and news on KFRM, which is now a big station out of Clay Center, Kansas. At that time, it was owned by Max Sanders and Larry Steckline, and they had the Great Plains Farm Show, and I would fill in on there, and that's kind of how I learned how to do a little more of the ag stuff. Even though I was familiar, it was a different world by then. And then I became the program director. Within, I think, 6 or 8 months, I was program director and the morning disc jockey on KICT. And Steckline eventually started the Mid-America Ag Network. And I worked for the Larry Steckline a total of 15 years. I was at Pratt, Kansas for a number of years. I also was at Farm Credit, Greensburg, Kansas, at the Greensburg PCA as marketing director for 4 years. That was successful because we all got laid off in the farm crisis of '83, so I guess I didn't market very well. And then I went back to work for Steckline, and I went to the Mid-America Ag Network out of Wichita. And I worked for him for a number of years. 1994, I got a call from a friend, Bert Chambers, and he was Enid, and he was looking to do a little ag on KGWA and KOFM radio. And he knew I wasn't working, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm going to auctioneer school in Kansas City. I'm going to do auctions." He said, "How would you like to do radio again?" So bottom line is the Hammer Williams companies, which own the Jiffy Trips, Mini Marts around northwest Oklahoma, a couple of newspapers, and they also owned those radio stations. And they joined with Bert and I and a man named Don Schultz, and we started the Quinstar Radio Network and Hennessy in Johnny Curran's office. So that's how we started. And Don Schultz and I drove the state of Oklahoma looking for radio stations that were not affiliated with Ron's Oklahoma Agrinet at that time. And then I went to work. Ron called me and wanted me to come down and work for him in Oklahoma City for Clear Channel and the Oklahoma Agrinet and all the other radio networks we have.
You know, I think I first met Mike Dain when he was working for the Oklahoma Agrinet and with Ron Hayes and that crew. And as they were, as I was learning what was going on in the pork industry, as I started at the Oklahoma Pork Council, and so for as long as I can remember, we've had an opportunity to work with Mike on different stories, whether it was the challenges of the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, and into some of the later stories as we've gone. And I've always appreciated the fact that Mike's never hesitated to call me when he had a question about something that was going on in the pork industry, that he's always tried to portray our side of the story. And with his connections into the Oklahoma News Network and the other stations that subscribe to their network services, it's a great way for us to get our message out across the state. And so always been tremendous to work with, quick to ask us questions when there's something he thinks might be newsworthy. Hey, do you have a few minutes to talk to me? And really appreciate that. Over the last couple of years, they've started sending out daily 2 or 3 emails a day with their ag news broadcast. So if I'm not able to catch the news or what they're reporting is the ag news of the day, the markets, whatever it may be, I can listen from my computer a couple of times a day and I can catch up on what the breaking or the top stories of the day are. And I think that's very beneficial, and certainly appreciate Mike sharing that with us as we go.
Well, there are about 165 of us farm broadcasters in the United States. That we are primarily, I call us ag advocates, and we are not news purists. We want to present both sides of the story, but we almost always are going to come down on the side of agriculture and try to tell the correct story or the truth. But if there's a bad thing going on, you can't ignore that. You have to, but you have to try to be balanced. But we're not necessarily investigative reporters. We are reporting the agriculture news and the markets, and it's very difficult. First of all, we were not known as a hog state, as a pork state, and here it comes all of a sudden, and it just grew exponentially. And I can remember coming to Hennessy, Oklahoma, and driving around, and I see this PIC, and I thought, what is that? And then all these hog farms popping up, and I know there were challenges for those in the industry and for you and everyone. Getting everything right and making sure the neighbors were happy and the environmentalists and everything. But I saw a great industry pop up almost overnight. I think the industry's handled everything very, very well, and it's become a vital part of Oklahoma's agriculture. K.D. Lang did a commercial for a PSA for PETA in which she kissed a cow. And my boss, Mr. Steckline, fairly vociferous individual, got on his TV show that he did from his home studio every morning and railed about the fact that she could do that and blah, blah, blah. And he banned all of the K.D. Lang records from the 8 radio stations he owned. I think it was 8. And they had a PETA protest outside our office in Wichita. And so he went out and met with them. PETA protested the furs and production agriculture and all kinds of stuff. And it was quite a notorious deal. We were getting calls from, I think John Block called us, and I don't know whether he wasn't still Secretary of Agriculture. And Leroy Van Dyke called and said, "You guys are on my side," blah, 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 blah. And I had to sneak out the back door to go to do the television show at noon at Channel 3 that day. And they were covering it, so we were tossing it back and forth. That was kind of exciting. It was fun. It really wasn't a big deal, but he made it a big deal by making fun of her and banning her records on his radio station.
It was really interesting. We had some protesters come to Pork Congress a couple of years ago, and Mike kind of he came in and he saw him out front and asked us what was going on, and he went back out front and kind of watched what was happening with the protest and would report back to us a little bit what was going on, ask for feedback, and not just feedback from us, but then share our story. These were folks, they had done media outreach, they had tried to get other media coverage of the event, and Mike wanted to make sure that not just a story for the ag side of what they do, but also somebody for the news network side, and had them call to get some comments from us. And I think that was very beneficial to us to be able to share that story with a wider range of people than we probably would have had it not been for Mike recognizing that, hey, maybe we need to share this story outside of our typical ag network.
It shows that Oklahoma's really grown. I would have never thought when I came here in 1994 that the Pork Council would be strong like you are today with the amount of hogs we have in Oklahoma, because to me, it was a very minor bump back in the old days. It's kind of like canola, and you've grown so much. So it's quite an honor, quite frankly. I've received awards from several groups, and it means so much to me, because it means that I have been successful in establishing relationships with you, the board members, the industry, and agriculture in general. It's very humbling for me.